FMLA to MDI to T3R13.
We gotta take the power back.
This is the George Hale Rick Tyler Show, welcoming on the PDQ to our telephone line.
Come on!
In Scarborough this morning, Secretary of State Charlie Summers. Sir, welcome back to the George Hale Rick Tyler Show.
Good morning, Rick. Good morning, George.
Hi, Charlie. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. All right.
Well, let's start with the obvious. Let's go to the obvious. You sent a letter. It went out to about 200 of the university students that were recently cleared in that voter fraud investigation. And
Yes.
your advice, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to get a Maine driver's license and register their vehicles or give up their right to vote. Is that accurate?
No, that is absolutely inaccurate.
All
I
right,
saw
so the press reports aren't right.
Absolutely. The Bangor Daily News reprinted an article this morning from the Lewiston Sun-Journal, which I think in the 22 years I've been involved in politics is probably the most irresponsible piece of journalism I've ever seen. There is nothing in the letter that I sent to these students that would ever suggest that they have to register their vehicle or give up their right to vote. That is patently false. What I did was, based on a 1980 Attorney General opinion, which says that students who claim their residency in Maine by registering to vote, it says that registering to vote is a declarative action, which you sign your name to a piece of paper saying you are a resident of the state. In 1980, the Attorney General actually issued a written opinion that those individuals do fall under the jurisdiction of Title 29A, which is the motor vehicle laws. Now, keep in mind that Maine is in a pretty unique situation as far as the Secretary of State is concerned, in that the Secretary of State is not only the chief elections official, but also the chief motor vehicle official. I have jurisdiction over motor vehicles. There are only two other states besides Maine, that's Illinois and Michigan, that have the Secretaries of State have jurisdiction over motor vehicle. So when I have something in front of me, knowing that someone may be not in compliance with our motor vehicle laws, even though it may be completely innocent, I have a responsibility to let them know. So I sent them a letter and let them know that if they have a motor vehicle, they need to register within 30 days of declaring their residency. That's if they have a motor vehicle. Now, if they're driving their father's car from out of state or their mother's car from out of state, that does not apply. And also, if they hold a driver's license, they should convert their driver's license to a Maine driver's license within 30 days. The letter I sent to them was very friendly. In fact, I asked them to call my office if they have any concerns or questions, and we can work with them to help them come into compliance.
Let us try to do this chronologically if we can for listeners catching up on this. Charlie Webster, the chair of the Republican Party, compiled this list of some 200 out-of-state college students who also voted in Maine. As I understand it, Secretary Summers, you did the investigation. You found no fraud. But if I'm reading the numbers correctly, and again, stop and correct us if we're seeing something in a news account that is incorrect, you found that 191 of the 200-plus students did not have a Maine driver's license or did not register their vehicles in the state of Maine. How am I doing so far?
That's pretty accurate.
Okay. Now, does state law actually require that they get a license or...
Yes, it does.
Within 30 days of declaring residency, and by voting, they declared their residency.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too, Rick, that currently, if someone is an out-of-state student in Maine and they do not declare residency by registering to vote, they are exempt from having to change their driver's license to a Maine driver's license and register their vehicle if they own one. They're exempt. But once someone registers to vote, now this is whether they're a student or whether they're a lobsterman, it doesn't matter. But once they register to vote in Maine, that is a declarative action. And by doing that, they are saying that they are now a resident of the state of Maine.
But by not declaring their residency by voting, but not getting a Maine driver's license or registering their vehicle if they have one, have they run afoul of a law? And a listener wants to know, what is the penalty?
Well, the penalty could be it could be a fine, or it could be the Secretary of State asking them to come into compliance. And of course, if they don't, then you begin to go down the road of enforcement. But I think it's important to note that my letter was a letter that was sent to ask them to come into compliance. And people are not going after students like the articles in the newspaper are suggesting. We're simply saying that every resident of the state of Maine is required to do this, and we're asking them to come into compliance and trying to work with people and try and help them, because many of them may have unwittingly, once they registered, not known that they are subject to these laws. But it's very clear, and like I said, it's based on an Attorney General's opinion back in 1980. Now, why previous Secretaries of State have not enforced this, I don't know. But it's very, very clear. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, Rick, I'm forwarding a copy of the Attorney General's opinion to you, so you guys will be the first to have a copy from my office on that. You can take a look at it, and we can discuss it at any time. But again, I want to point out that the article that appeared in the Bangor Daily today and the Lewiston Sun Journal yesterday, it's the same article. Suggests that we're trying to scare students, and there's nothing further from the truth. In fact, if you want to really look at what scares students, it's irresponsible reporting and sensational headlines like appeared in the Bangor Daily today and the Lewiston Sun Journal yesterday. That should scare students, and that's unfortunate that the newspaper has stooped to that level.
Or are misinformed, if you're correct. So anyone who's not in compliance is going to get a letter, is that right? Not only students, it's anybody. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and people, someone asked me yesterday, a reporter asked me yesterday, well, have you notified anyone else? And if they come to my attention, the answer is yes, but you have to keep in mind that there are over 1 million driver's license and IDs issued in this state. And it's a little difficult to know the situation of every single driver. But as we go through, and if these issues come to my attention, then I have a responsibility to meet my oath of office, and that's to uphold the laws of the state and to let individuals know that they need to come into compliance.
Well, it's obvious we're in an election cycle here with a referendum coming. It's not going to be an easy test for you, I'm sure. And David Farmer and some others are going to be out trying to get this new rule turned over in November. So I suppose that the charges are going to go back and forth. The charge that you are trying to politicize your office must be one that you're not happy with.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think people know my support for LD 1376. It was my bill. I had it introduced on behalf of the department. So, the fact that I have made my support of that legislation public is no secret. But to suggest that I'm trying to politicize the office, I just disagree with that. I think, you're right, George. This is an election season, and people like to try to demagogue issues. And the fact of the matter is LD 1376 is a very, very moderate step that is asking people, backing the registration deadline up 2 business days, asking people to register a little bit ahead of time so the clerks can have the opportunity to prepare themselves for the election. And I think when you look at that in the scope of everything, our men and women who are serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, if they want to get a ballot mailed to them, they have to do it 45 days in advance. And my office, prior to my becoming Secretary of State, was receiving ballots from Afghanistan 2 months after the 2010 election. And, when those men and women who are out fighting for our freedoms have to do it 45 days in advance, it seems to me that 48 hours is not a lot to ask so that our clerks could prepare themselves and we can have elections and registration that are run, not only in accordance with law, but with the highest of integrity.
In Scarborough this morning, Secretary of State Charlie Summers on the George Hill Rick Tyler Show. Last time on with us, you had mentioned that you would hope to see some crafting of legislation to be considered by the full legislature that would maybe sort out some of these questionable, rules that are on the books concerning who can vote, when can they vote, what must they do to vote. Would that legislation involve maybe a clarification of this law that requires someone who's out of state that comes, register their vehicle, at least get the driver's license? Would this be an aspect of that legislation to try to clear up this matter?
Well, I think that, we can certainly restate Title 29A's requirements, Title 29A being the motor vehicle laws, But it's pretty clear in statute right now. One thing I think that it would be very, very important, or will be very, very important, is that the legislature come up with one definition of residency. There are probably a half a dozen definitions of residency in the Maine statutes as they apply either to voting or to tax issues and so forth. I think we need one definition of residency, one thing that is clear. But, again, my efforts to have people come in compliance with this law, it's something that should have been done over the last 3 decades because, and again, I just forwarded to you, Rick,
Got it.
Attorney General Cohen's written opinion that, and by the way, this written opinion came after the Supreme Court ruled on students using their dormitories as addresses to vote. So, this is very, very clear. It's never been challenged, and it's, clear that when someone registers to vote, that's a declarative statement. They're signing their name to a piece of paper saying that they are residents of the state of Maine and thus are subject to motor vehicle laws.
The article that appeared in the Lewiston Sun-Journal and the article that was reprinted locally in the BDN highlights the fact that it's a Class E crime. And I smile at that a little bit. It sounds awful serious, but a Class E crime, it does talk about the statutes and section. And when you talk about Class E crimes punishable by 6 months in jail and $1,000 fines, that looks good in print, but how serious is that?
Well, I mean, if you're asking, if suddenly, we're going to be finding students and trying to put them in jail for 6 months, that is not the case. We're simply asking someone to come into compliance with the law, and we're willing to work together and not have what appears to be portrayed as an adversarial situation. I mean, what we have, I believe, in the case of students, many of which registered and were not aware that by doing so that they were subjecting themselves to the requirements of Maine statutes. And, we're trying to work with the students, help them come in compliance.
Charlie Summer, Secretary of State on the George Hill Rick Tyler Show. As you can imagine, we're getting a lot of questions coming into our email inbox as well as our Facebook pages. One person in the Old Town Orono area asks, and I don't know if this has come across your desk, Mr. Secretary, what happens if the state is charging out-of-state tuition but then requires a student to become an in-state resident?
Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up because in the Attorney General's opinion that I have sent to you, it's very clear in that written opinion that it's the university system that sets requirements for tuition, and the university does not look at registering to vote as declaring their in-state residency. So they're the ones who set that requirement, not the state.
So if any student or parents, and they're quoting parents here in the article, if any student or parent is concerned about their situation, they call your office in Augusta, they're told what they must do in the report. Is that about...
That's exactly right. I mean, my office number is 626-8400, and I encourage if somebody has a question or concern to please call the office. We will walk them through the process. This is not difficult. In fact, in the letter that I sent out, I said, if you no longer consider yourself a resident of the state, please notify us so that we can update our central voter registration file. If you do, please convert your driver's license, and if you happen to own a motor vehicle, register your motor vehicle. But let me just go back just for 1 second, because I'd like to read from the AG's opinion in reference to in-state tuition, which Attorney General Cohen in 1980 said it should be noted that the act of registering to vote and becoming the word is domiciliary of the state does not carry the commitment benefit of entitling an out-of-state student to an in-state tuition rate. The University of Maine Board of Trustees have promulgated rules governing residents in this state which require that an out-of-state student is eligible for resident classification in the university only after he or she has a bona fide domiciliary of the state for a 1-year period. So, it's very clear when dealing with students with out-of-state and in-state tuition issues.
Do you intend to reach out to the reporter that penned the item for the Lewiston Sun-Journal?
Yeah, I believe we're going to have an article in the Sun-Journal tomorrow, and I'll be contacting the Bangor Daily News to request equal space as well to clarify the inaccurate reporting.
All right, so the newspaper reports that we're reading today, you take umbrage with, and
well, it's completely irresponsible, and
okay.
what it does is it fans the flames of fear among the students, and I think if the newspapers were truly concerned about the students being afraid by this letter, they would not publish something so irresponsible. And I'll be happy to forward you and George and Rick a copy of the letter that I sent to students. I mean, it's very clear. It is not aggressive in any sense other than to say, please contact us if you have any questions.